Welcome to another weekly featured business, brought to you by Visibility Impact and your host, James Moffat, where he will gracefully take our featured guest on a personal and business journey and stories that will inspire, educate, and engage you.
Okay, so welcome to another featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact and your host, myself, James Moffat. Today we have our 102nd guest, right? Frank Jacob. Now, Frank, I'm saying your name right because I'm absolutely terrible with names.
Doing good so far.
Excellent. I mean, if I guess from all over the world and some of the names just cannot pronounce, right? So, Frank, you are our 102nd guest, so welcome. And I've been following you and I found you extremely interesting, and hence the reason why I've invited you to the show. So anyone watching the replay, feel free to reach out to Frank. There will be contact information, links and everything provided afterwards. So if you've missed this, then don't worry, you can catch up later. So Frank, let's get going. So we do have, hopefully our singer will join later, so we'll just break up the show then and just have a little pause for the singer. But in the meantime, let's make a start. So Frank, tell us, first of all, where are you living now and where are you originally from?
Right now I'm living in Bavaria in Germany, in the Alps. And to get here obviously was a long road, a long path. Took about many years, actually several decades, but I originally came from Canada, from Ontario, Canada, from the English-speaking part of Canada, and moved around many years. And then eventually at a very early age, I decided to break out into the world and seek my destiny.
Growing up in Canada and then moving to Germany, I mean, did you live in other places prior to that, and why did you head off to Germany?
Well, my parents are originally from Germany, and like many Germans in the 60s and 70s, there was an emigration wave to various parts of the world, in America and Canada. My parents chose Canada, and that's where I came into the world as the first non-German member of my family tree, you could say. And so they tried it, the grass is always greener, as they say, in Canada for a few years. And then they decided, the grass isn't greener, let's go back to Germany. So they hauled the family back to Germany. So I lived in Germany for about 3.5 years. And then they decided, well, the grass is greener in Canada. So they decided to up the family again and go all the way back to Canada. And, being that Germans, very frugal and practical, they moved back to the same place they left. So it was funny. I had this 3.5-year break with my friends that in public school, and then I came back and they were a little bit older, so was I, but now I had this German side to me, or I could speak German. But of course then I was very young, so then many decades passed and I never spoke German, so I lost it all again, and didn't really have to learn the language again until I decided then, at some point I was in the United States. I've been living in the States for a few years. It led me to the States for various reasons. For a time, I was an artist. I was a musician. I was seeking a career in the performing arts as a writer and as a record producer or musician. And, at some point you head to the States because there's nothing going on in Canada. So that's kind of what led me there originally. And then I always knew sort of that there is much more going on in the States. And so that's where I sort of ultimately ended up going and living for many years. And then when I was at a certain point, I think I'd kind of catapulted around, living in various places with various chapters of my life, various interests. I've had a very broad spectrum of interests and passions, not just music, but also nutrition, or I was a vegetarian, very strict for many years. I also taught people about something called the living food lifestyle, which I learned from a woman called Anne Wigmore. And when I lived in Boston for a while, that was that chapter. And so I've had this sort of patched, colorful, interesting perspective on things. And it led me then ultimately to Arizona and then California. And then at the time that George W. Bush was being elected, I was kind of pedaling between Houston and Los Angeles, working for some internet entrepreneurs because I had a knack for computers, or at least, user interfaces, and understanding the signal flow of audio led me to understand a lot about what goes on in the internet. Even though I wasn't a programmer, I was good at, understanding interfaces, websites, where they lead, and people hired me in Los Angeles to develop, to head up an incubator, to develop business plans during the internet craze years in the 90s. And then Bush came into power. And right at that time, I decided, I had this passport because my parents because they were Germans, I'd inherited this passport, and that allowed me to set foot in the European Union legally and work there and live there without any problems. And so I decided, it was the last year, because the condition of the passport was that you had to use it within a certain amount of time, and if you didn't, then you would lose it. So it was the final year, the final month, in fact, the final week of the passport expiring. And I decided to get on a plane and go visit my sister, who was living in Munich. And that led me to kind of fall in love with this little town, Munich, with a nice English garden. And I thought, these old Baroque buildings and the architecture from where I'd been living in Los Angeles, very, very, clinical, ugly, like worker town, or Boston, really like large buildings, very cold, So I decided, hey, time to make that move. So that's why I decided to come and start life, in the middle of my life, start fresh, like born yesterday in the middle of my life, kind of in Germany.
Wow. You said a lot there already. So, so you mentioned your sister, so you have siblings, so just a sister, or?
I have a sister. Mm-hmm.
Right. And when your parents moved to Germany, she stayed there, or she went back to Canada?
No, she was born in Germany, and she had gone. The two of us are kind of like opposite ends of the pole, right? She is my mother wanted her to be the career power woman, and she, went to university. She was always getting the highest grades. She was the brainy one. And I was the kind of, well, I guess I would be considered the black sheep. I was the rebel. I was in bands, I smoked pot, it's like, I went that direction, right? But, and eventually, it's amazing how things develop in life, but, yeah, so, she went, because she finished her university degree in Canada. She wanted to become a lawyer. So but she was interested in Germany. So she went to Germany to try and succeed as a lawyer. So that's what, she's doing. And she's very successful, and she's done it. She's managed it as a woman, quite a feat, landing in a very, at that time, chauvinist profession of law in Germany. She climbed, clawed her way up to her own practice. And, so I'm very proud of her, and that's kind of why without her, I probably never would have set foot in Germany, because it would have been like, where? Okay. Where do I set foot? I would have come for a couple of weeks, like I did when I was 18, and do a walkabout through Germany, and and then go back to Canada, and then continue my life, right? But because of her, I guess she's the bridge that led me here. So I have her to thank, or you have her to thank, for the fact that I'm, in Germany.
Yeah. So I guess you're very close with her then.
Well, we're close. I mean, we're as close as two people that have really a lot of different opinions about reality can be, but we're siblings, and we're alone in the world, so alone against the world. So yeah, we're our blood. The blood is thicker than water, as they say. Yeah. So absolutely.
So your parents are still in Canada?
No, my parents, they were living in Canada. And it was interesting because they, at one point, it was my parents, the Germans, were in Canada, and the kids, the Canadians, were in Germany. And but then there was a point in their lives where they were getting older, and there were some other issues, health issues and stuff. And we had to intervene and really actually bring them over to Germany so that they were taken care of, because they were not able to take care of each other due to health reasons. Okay. And so, yeah, that's how they landed up over here, and they've been here ever since. So now the whole family's back in Germany. Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned, I mean, you kind of ping pong between Canada and Germany. So growing up in Canada, did you speak then, because your parents were German, did you speak German at home, or was it always English?
No, I spoke English, and that's why I learned. That's why I lost my German, because my parents had this deal with us they wanted to learn English, and they wanted us to sort of still know German. So they always spoke German to us, and we spoke English back, which was great for when friends came to hang out at our house, because they'd only understand half the conversation. Yeah, so I always understood it, but I never spoke it. And, I realized how difficult that, I thought that when I came to Germany, easy, I can understand German, right? But it isn't that easy. German's a very difficult language to speak.
Tell me about it. I mean, my wife is from Brazil, and we've got 3 kids, and we live in Bern, just outside of, in Switzerland, just outside of Bern. And yeah, it's Swiss German here. And they say, go to school and learn High German. So I go to school to learn High German. And when I come out and everyone's speaking Swiss German, I think, well, I still don't understand a word they're saying. But I mean,
Swiss German.
Yeah, I mean, even for Germans, like coming to Switzerland, hearing Swiss German, it's a foreign language. So, but my kids, I mean, they speak Brazilian, Portuguese, English, and Swiss German, and they're now learning French at school. So great for them. But I mean, for me, they all have their secret languages, because when their friends come around, I have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, Swiss German just eludes me. I mean, it's so difficult. So anyway, Frank, growing up as a kid, I mean, you've already mentioned about being a musician. So where did that first come in? I mean, growing up as a kid, did you see yourself as a rock star, or how did that happen?
Well, my father was kind of a weekend musician, and he played in cover bands. He was a singer and a bassist and a trumpet player. Wow. So I was exposed to that part of there was musical tendencies in the family, you could say. But he didn't play the kind of music that I wanted to play, and I didn't know I wanted to play music. And then when I was studying, when I was in school, at a certain age, there was an instrumental. There was a choice. You could make a choice in class to either be in a vocal. In this particular school I was in, you could either be in a vocal, you could take a singing class, or you could take an instrumental music class. And since I didn't see myself as a singer, I decided to take the instrumental music class. And you know how it is when you're like 13, and you're getting into this classroom, and it's all strange, and this new school, and you have to make a choice of what instrument. And of course, the coolest kids always ran to the drum set and got, and took control. And, all the cool instruments were kind of like quickly grabbed. And then I ended up with a saxophone.
I ended up with a triangle.
So, I was doing the sax, and my parents said, well, why don't you, and my teacher of that class, he was, he noticed that I had an affinity. I had a musical, whatever you call it. Gift. Yeah. And he decided, he said, why don't you take, I give private lessons. And so my parents decided to buy me a sax, and I took private lessons with this school teacher. I think I even remember his name. I think his name was, what was his name? Moser or something. Larry Moser. Yeah. And I started taking instrumental like saxophone classes with him. And I learned, reading notes and meter and all that stuff. And I went into some contests. I even won. But then it was sax. And at the time, at that point in life, sax was about as cool as, I mean, well, I don't know. I can't think of anything right now, but it wasn't very cool. The cool bands were playing guitar. They were getting all stoned, with lasers and lights and, electric guitars and keyboards. And, so the sax wasn't really part of that. So I was always, and so I went to see a band when I was very young in my high school. And I really kind of was watching the drummer, and I'm like, wow, he was a really good drummer. And I was just blown away by his body coordination and, just what it did to the music. And I realized the drummer is the critical guy in the band. Without the drummer, there's no flow, there's no accent, the music just dies, I mean, it's just boring. And so I decided at that point I wanted to be a drummer, not a sax player. And my parents were being Germans, they were strict. They said, no, we bought you a saxophone, you learn, so, but if you want to learn drums, you have to get rid of the saxophone. I mean, it's kind of idiotic when you think about it. They should be going, oh my God, he loves sax and drums. This is so cool. We'll get him both, right? Like if I was living in California, my parents would be like, oh yeah, of course, drums and sax. And why don't we get on the keyboard too, But no, it was like one or the other. So I had to sell the sax. I bought a drum set. Before I even bought a drum set, I was playing on pillows and pots and pans. I was so into it. My friends and I used to jam in the basement on pots and pans. Like it was just nuts, right? When you're a kid, it's fantasy, right? Fantasy. I guess it's valuable, right? Because, you're fantasizing about, you're visualizing yourself. And I realized that, that was my first experience in visualization. And I realized I could visualize myself playing. And that I later took that that idea of visualizing into everything, sports. In fact, I was getting into sports too. Sports was something I was into because I was coordinated, so I was good at basketball, volleyball, and I was immediately like in the sports teams, and always usually like one of the better players, which was cool. And so it was all about visualization. I used to visualize, when I was 12 or 13. There was this guy, Julius Erving, who was a basketball star in the Philadelphia 76ers, I think is what they were, the basketball team.
Yeah.
And, he used to just fly in the air like a ballerina. And you just, so you're like, wow, how does he do that? He defies gravity. So as a small boy, you're like, wow, this is so cool. I want to be like that. And it was the same with drums, so you'd visualize yourself playing the instrument. And that's kind of how it started. And so, yeah, that's the start of my music and the venture in the music.
Yeah, I love what you said there. I mean, visualizing yourself there, you're already kind of halfway there. I mean, I used to be very much into, running when I was a kid, a fast runner, but I'd always visualized that I was the first to cross the line. And I always was. And then I always visualized, I like motorsports, and I was good at go-kart racing. And we used to do it a lot when we were kids. And we did basically every circuit, every type of car, in the wet, in the rain, indoors, outdoors, whatever. And I always loved it. And I always felt I was a good driver. So I was always visualized I've already won. And then typically I would win. Trying not to be too egotistical about it. I was a good driver.
Yeah, but there's nothing unusual about that. If I just jump in you on that point, because when I worked many years later at Red Bull Media House producing extreme sport videos, one show in particular was called The Ultimate Rush. And I produced series 2 and 3. I produced a lot of episodes, and I was the supervising editor. And I asked that question as the director of a lot of those shows. I would ask the athletes, like, how do you, and they all answered that same way. They said, we already see ourselves on the other end of the stunt, or the other end of what it is they're doing. Like if it's a cliff, if it's a guy doing free climbing on a cliff, he sees himself at the top, and it's this emotional charge that you get when you've succeeded at it. That's the part that seems to lend you the wings that you need to kind of surpass all the odds, even gravity. And
again, jumping in there, you're absolutely right. I did a lot of these kind of startup entrepreneurial kind of training programs, and it was always about visualizing where you want to be, not where you are now. It's where you want to be, and then if you can visualize that, what it feels like to be there, then you're halfway there. Rather than feeling I'm useless, I can't do anything, I'm down in the dumps, well, then you're going to stay there.
Yeah, this is a key point, James. This that you've hit on here. This is a key point to everything. It's the key to shaping reality. And if you've learned that, when you visualize, when I was playing the drums, I wouldn't, I was doing a fill. I wasn't visualizing in the middle of the fill. I was visualizing the landing at the end of the fill, and, back into the groove. Right. So that's the only way I was ever able to do it. And it's always been that way. And it's like, and it's the same way when people, they visualize, if they want to visualize a positive world, they have to see that world in their mind, and they shoot for it, no compromise. They just know they're going to get there. And I think we all have this ability as creative beings. That's what separates us from all other beings, even animals. You know, animals don't create that way in sense of visualization. They don't visualize next week's menu, you know. They just go along with the thing that animals do well is they're in the moment. They accept what's there and they don't complain about it. So it's, you know, life is kind of a combination to me between accepting what you're dealing with. In other words, this is where you're at right now. Don't argue with it, just deal with it, accept it, but have the vision of where you want to go and feel the emotion of when you've achieved that, when you've gotten to the end of it. And I think pretty much that's the focal point behind everything that I've ever done in my life, because I've done a lot of different things. You know, I've done really, I mean, I've had no real straight direction. I've never went to university. But I went, when I got into a subject that interested me, I was better than the guy that went to university and studied that subject, because I was passionate about it and I learned everything there was about it so that I could talk on any level, a PhD if I wanted to, any level. I remember when I was in LA and I was working on the think tank with those internet entrepreneurs. We brought in, you know, money people and their educated university master degree business partners to oversee the product, but they were coming to me for the information and I was teaching them about where we're going here, because I was the one that was aware and knew the subject matter better than anybody. And that doesn't make me a genius or anything. It's just that I realized very early on that is the key. Whatever you do, commit to it, and then when you're done, you know, you move on, right? And if it sticks, it sticks, and if it doesn't, then it was just a chapter in your life. But you know, and some things in my life I've carried along all through my life because I realized that they were valuable. They're part of me that I'd never really want to give up, because my life would be empty without them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I've also found that. I mean, I've worked a lot with students and startups, and I found that they might have gone and got the academical background and they got the masters, the PhD, the postdocs, the whatever, but they haven't got the common sense, and they haven't got things that you need multiple different things. You can be a genius in one thing, but I still, exactly what you say. I mean, I would challenge them because I absorb many other things from different places. And I also inject things that are missing from that education. I mean, when you talk about, I mean, everything is focused on academical skills. My kids go there. If they don't get the A+ in maths, then they amount to nothing. But what about their emotional intelligences? And what about the way they think? Why they think in that certain way? I mean,
this is the problem with the educational system in general, what you're talking about here. It's because, you know, when you're in university, what are you, 20, 22, you know, whatever. I was like, what do you know about life? Right. And this is the big problem in terms of people who come out of university with degrees and then move on to other positions like, God forbid, government. They've never actually had any real life, you know, hard knocks experience. And they're now moving in, like in Germany, the foreign minister has, you know, she's a trampoline champion. I mean, that's her big accomplishment in life, right? I mean, she has no real, she probably never missed a meal, you know, and she's never really gone out there on the edge of life and dealt with people that are living near the street on the curb, you know, 2 inches from the curb. And that gives you a different perspective. And this universities and the educational system really teaches you something, which is on the other aspect of it is what you're learning in university is already obsolete. The knowledge and the knowledge base in the world on particular subjects is growing so quickly that by the time you've graduated 4 years later, that information you've learned is already obsolete. And so we live in a world that is based on obsolescence. Everybody that's in the system is practicing something which is no longer true. It's an interesting conundrum to deal with, right? It's like we've collectively agreed to live in the past, to live in a certain level of ignorance so that we don't know what's happening. And the other thing that they don't tell you about in school is that they don't tell you that because that'll of course discourage everyone, for they'll just walk out. And B, they don't tell you, listen, what we're teaching you to do here is to use that thing in your head. It's called a brain. It's good at, you know, it's got neurons and they can connect with each other and store patterns. And so we're teaching you to learn, memorize, analyze, compare, but the subject matter is actually pretty unimportant. It's the process of learning that you're learning. And that if they would have told me that in school, I would have had a much more positive attitude, because I could see from very early on already through like I already kind of checked that, because when I was 12, I started to open up to metaphysical books and into other levels of reality, other levels of thinking and metaphysics. And so the school system was like, yeah, this test is required. I have to memorize the X, Y, and Z to pass. Got it. Okay, do it. And I was good at that. I could memorize it. I got through school with pretty good grades, but I was never passionate about any of it. Because there was no, the only teacher that ever got me interested once was a teacher that was talking about how they never landed on the moon. Right. And he did a whole week long, like he set aside the whole curriculum, and the class was so into it that they just sat and listened to him talk for like a week about this, they never landed on the moon thing. Right. So, and that was the most exciting, Then the other thing, the highlight of my school was when I took a film course, because I learned about film. I learned what a film is made of, what it's about, how they're made and stuff on a very rudimentary level. Of course, it wasn't like a university degree film school. It was just a course in film in high school, which is, you can't even compare it. But for someone like me, I just, absorbed that information and thought, okay, I want to do film. I see here a very powerful communication method of higher order thinking. Sylvia, did you want to say something?
Yes. Now I can lower my hand. I am totally on board with you about this crisis of critical thinking that is starting to become outdated, because it was, I think, already old when we were in school. And now it's worse because there is a lot more information around and knowledge that needs to be processed. And I understand that even in today's education, I don't know, you guys tell me, because I don't have children yet, it's a lot more important for you to memorize things and to do well, to learn the standards of performing, than to learn how to ask questions that matter to you, and questions that matter to others, that can help you connect to people and connect schools of thoughts and different theories, and how you can make a difference by asking questions. Raising awareness, I think, of any subject goes through raising asking good questions. So this is something that we talk about at home, how we're gonna, raise our invisible children to be critical thinkers, because they need this as a basic skill to thrive in life. We think so.
Yes, absolutely. That's another aspect of it, is the critical thinking, really, because unfortunately there's no course in critical thinking in any school that I know of. And that could be, that could be an idea for any professor who's listening at a university, like start a course in critical thinking, right? Take some holy cow, and bring it to the slaughter, sorry for the bad, analogy here, but the figurative holy cow and the figurative slaughter. Okay. Is that better? But,
yeah.
The idea of questioning things is very verboten in university, because exactly as you said, people that excel in the courses are those who've memorized everything correctly and that can reproduce it in the proper format, because form is very important as well. So it's memorization and reproducing in form that's already given. And so those are the people that strive. And then they find out that if they, in the summertime, if they, do a course or go to some recycling plant, work for free as a volunteer for 3 weeks, they get bonus points, so that when they apply for their university, scholarship or whatever, they have all these things like, or when they want to go for the job, the big fat high salary job at the end of that university degree, they can show they've done all these summer gigs where they've done X, Y, and Z. But it hasn't put anything into their head other than, okay, I'm following the system and I'm doing everything I'm told to do, and that should be sufficient. And that's the way our society, unfortunately, for the most part, at least in, let's say, the Western society, this emphasis on rigid form-based education has led us. And that's why now you have situations where when the pandemic took place and there were people that came from the critical side, they were shut down and that's the basic reason why, because the system out there is not used to people questioning the narrative. They've decided, and what is the phrase we hear a lot? The science is in, right? It's already done. There's no question. There's nothing to question anymore, people. It's done, right? So everyone that's part of the normie group, that, you know, the normalized, in the sense that they've adopted that formula as the consensus reality, they fit into that picture, and they are really downright threatened by those people who come forward with another perspective and say, no, people, you got to think about this, or have you thought about this as well? There's no room for that in our society, and that's the reason that society is going to fail. And that's the reason why, I mean, that particular version of our timeline right now is going to fail, because the only way it will survive if it's taken over by machines, you know, because machines will order it back into perfect machine thinking. And that's actually the direction that we're heading in society right now.
Yeah. Let me just add to that. So it just got me thinking of a few things, right? So, I mean, I have small kids at school, and my eldest son is 9. So he comes back and he's having science programs at school, and they're learning about the planets and where they are and the distance apart, and the sun and the moon and Mars, and he could name them all. And yeah, it's quite ironic, because he comes back and he starts sharing this with me at home, and I have a completely different view on that. When I was a kid, I thought the same as him. I thought a few balls flying around in space. But over the last few years, I've come to realize, well, from my personal point of view, that it's nothing like what we are being told it is. That is all a lie. It's all a big illusion. But that's a personal point of view. But I've done my research, and I'm sticking by that regardless. But it's hard, because he now applies critical thinking. He challenges. He says why. He asks me so many questions, which is not the norm, because people don't want you, society don't want you to ask questions. They want you to tell you that this is the way it is, and it just is, right? Don't ask why, it just is, right? And follow the rules.
Right. Well, that's because, you know, you have to ask yourself, where does that come from? Right. And my answer to that question is, I think it goes back to when we were really living in tribal like survival units during an ice age or after an ice age, where if you were to question the group narrative, your chances were you would get kicked out of the clan and thrown to the lions, literally, and your chances of survival were very low. So you had to learn to compromise and adjust your thought, even if it didn't agree with the stronger leader of the tribe. You just went along with it. And I think that became so well established that it became, you know, cellular memory. And that cellular memory is built into our DNA. And when we build our very bodies, we build them off of the code of a DNA. And that DNA includes that kind of information, that kind of memory, if you will, that's in the morphogenetic field that forms the cells and forms the DNA. And that's the pattern that we actually are struggling to try and break, because those who are nowadays, there's no more threat like that. We've managed to, you know, we've conquered nature, or I mean, not really, but we'd like to believe that we have, right? And we've conquered our environment, and we're the masters of our reality. And that reflects also in the spiritual New Age community. It's all about, you know, being empowered and in control of your reality, and, you know, being the master of your destiny, and all these, you know, all these self-help courses, like all these people that are out there that are teaching this information about, you know, control of your environment, right? It's very rigid, and it's actually very limiting in a way, because one of the, I think the strongest things you can do is to let go of the idea of control, and it's better just to kind of float with the system, and knowing who you are, and knowing what your skills are, and identify things, you know, based on your understanding of patterns, than it is to try and control it, because all you can really control is yourself and your reaction. You can't control anything else. You know, and society is hell bent on the idea of control, and it's control of the media, control of the narrative, right?
Well, I say it's kind of three things. It's greed, power, and control. And yeah, it's their way or the highway, basically. And I mean, these are subjects that we could talk on for a long, long time, and they really kind of resonate with me, and I get involved. But I mean, I found basically over the last 2 years has been kind of the real eye-opener, in the way that I've questioned. I mean, I've always questioned things, but I've questioned more, and I just don't accept necessarily the answer. I want to know why. I want to know, well, if that is like that, then what's behind that, and how deep do you need to go to really find out the truth? And then once you start kind of going down these rabbit holes, then you can go as deep as you want to go. And I'm not saying that everything down there is true, but I'm not saying that it's not untrue either. You just got to find what you believe feels right for you. And yeah, and then you find from other sources that it kind of connects the dots and it makes it right what you kind of felt. But anyway, a subject that, as I guess we could talk all night on, and it's great. I mean, I kind of love this. I just want to take you back a little bit. You mentioned that earlier, that your father had one type of music that he liked, and you had something different. So who were your influences when you were growing up on the music side?
I guess one of the first influence, well, I mean, one of the things that I liked when I started listening to music was I liked Stevie Wonder. And there was a band called Parliament Funkadelic, because it was just this groove thing. I really got into that, loved that. And then when I was 14, I started to, my sister's boyfriend, he was 3 or 4 years older than me. He was he was a member of something that was like a track and field club. And I don't know how it happened, but somehow he convinced me to join up this track and field club and I became a sprinter, 100, 200, 400 meters. And but the thing is that's not the important part. The important part was, well, I mean, the important part was great. I got in incredible physical shape.
Did you win?
But the interesting part was that he was into all these sort of metaphysical things. Like, he's the one that introduced me to a series of books written about Carlos Castaneda, and about this sort of other world, this sort of under the surface world, this spiritual metaphysical world. And I was fascinated by that. And then he was listening. So of course he became my hero for the time. He was like, when you're that young and there's someone a few years older than you that is that cool, they become your new hero. And of course I wanted to know what kind of music he was into. So he was into a band called Yes, and there was this album that came out, and it was, and so I went out and I got this album, and the album cover looked cool, and the music was like, just for me it was like, okay, if gods incarnated on earth and learned how to play, they would play like this. So and the album was called Going for the One. It had an awesome title, right? And it was just, and I was like, okay, and I listened to that and I became like obsessed with this high level of musicianship. And then once you're into that, then you explore some of the other bands that are into that, like King Crimson was one of them. And then comes Peter Gabriel, and I never got so much into Genesis for some reason. I think it was because he had left the band already, but I rediscovered Genesis actually very recently. It's kind of funny going back and reliving that chapter that I never got into when I've actually could have gone to see them play live. So there was that. But then when I got into playing, I wanted to play music. The guitarist that I connected with, he was into some German bands. Like, he was into this, there was some really weird German bands. They were like, and we had a nickname for them, Krautrock. The Krauts are what the English called the Germans in the Second World War. Derogatory term, of course, but I didn't know that. So we just thought it was cool. Krautrock. I even had a t-shirt made. And so there was like bands like Eloy and Grobschnitt, and I mean, it's just, so these became, and then another friend of mine, another guitarist, he was into heavy metal, and one particular band was Black Sabbath. And so I got into everything. I was like, I thought Black Sabbath were killer, man. They were like, that was to die for. That was like, if you wanted to get into a thick, heavy, distorted, sound of a guitar, and guys that really mean what they're playing, then Black Sabbath was it. And so for me, in my formative years of growing up, I was into all this stuff. So those were all of my influences. So even, it's kind of weird, like you would be into Sabbath and yet also be into Yes. You know, I mean, it didn't matter, because for me, it was the authenticity and the fact that they were inventors. These people invented something, because there was no music like this music at that time. There was just, that kind of, I mean, later then a lot of heavy metal bands branched off and copied that. For me, I could always see a copy. It became commercial. In fact, the whole music industry starting in the middle of the 70s became more and more streamlined toward commercialism, because then you started seeing, I remember us seeing a commercial with Robert Plant pitching Heineken beer. And for us, it was like, okay, man, he's a sellout. Forget it. He's gone. No more, no more Zeppelin. They sold out, right? That's how, committed you were as a teenager when you're into music. That if your musicians began pitching a product, now what do you have, right? You've got nothing but logos and products over every band everywhere all the time. So the generation that's growing up listening to music now has lost that sort of genuineness that was in music at that time. So I was lucky, because a lot of those bands were already in their dying days, because I came late. I mean, this is in the 70s and early 80s. They were already kind of disbanding and breaking up. And, so I barely caught a couple. I mean, I didn't see a lot of concerts, but whenever I saw Yes, that was great. Yeah. So you realize that, that kind of level of musicianship began fading, because then MIDI came into the game, and digital and sequences, and it became digitized, and then the whole new wave music scene came, and it changed. That the character of music changed. It lost that kind of crazy spontaneity, like, let's do a blood ceremony and we'll swear that we'll be in a band together for the next, for the rest of our lives. That's gone. It's all just like, how can we make money and how can we get famous? That's kind of what it's about now. I see a lot of it. I mean, if you have to look to jazz or something, to get into musicians that are still playing the instrument for the sake of being good on the instrument. A lot of people out there now, they don't even really play the instrument anymore. You have DJ what's so-and-so with special guest such and such singing. So it's not even, it's all synthetic. There's no more, there's that connection is lost, that between, sitting in a room and as a drummer at that point, and, against a guitarist and a keyboardist and a bassist and a singer, well, you had to start, you had to play, you had to groove together. You had to get into you had to lock in together. That was something very, very magical. I love that. And then if you could take that and take it onto a stage, if you were good enough and you could remember all the songs and all the lyrics and actually play it decently, getting in front of an audience and sharing that moment, that gift of connectivity, and extending it out into the audience where everyone gets into that groove together. That for me was like my religion. That's where you can communicate. That's why music was for me the medium. I wanted to be, you're right, I wanted to be a rock star, but not because I wanted to be famous for the sake of being famous. I figured I could be famous and then I could begin introducing these crazy metaphysical ideas into the lyrics, and then sort of bring society along with you into these other levels of thinking, and, challenge people with a hook that is a lyric they're singing, and when they think about the words, like, wait a minute, what am I singing about there? Like, what are they saying there? It's kind of like, it breaks that connection to the system and makes them think, right? So that was kind of those are some of the, I guess, the ideas behind my getting involved in music and some of the idols. Yeah,
I absolutely love it. I grew up in the UK. So, I mean, in my era was punk bands. So I liked, at the time, it was the Sex Pistols, the Clash, X-Ray Specs, the Damned, and bands like that. And I used to go to see them in concert. And I remember Newcastle City Hall, where I lived, in 1977, it said, "The Damned get the punks pogo in." And there's us up on the stage. I was the youngest in the group of friends I went with. And I used to go to Oxfam to buy my drainpipe trousers and my old jacket and stuff, and then quickly change clothes when I went home, so I just looked like a teenager again. But jumping on the stage, pogoing, and you got really into it. It was something different. But then later, I started following people like David Bowie, and I just listen to the lyrics now, and they mean so much more now than they did then, particularly like Space Odyssey. And my eldest son is called Tom, so we always sing in ground control to major tone and whatever. But yeah, music, likewise, I mean, music lifts you up. It can also make you feel depressed, but I mean, the idea is to lift you up and make you feel great. But on that note, we have Emily has joined us, and she is a singer that normally kicks off the show. So Emily, I know that you're there and you've joined, and this is a perfect moment for you to sing us a song. Emily? Come on.
Well, our
Emily.
timing was good. We're talking about music, so what better timing than having...
Well, I mean, I was chatting to her on WhatsApp, so I knew she was going to come, so I kind of went back to the music stuff. Well, she should be here. Right. And then I mean, I'll let her introduce herself, but she sings cover songs, her own songs. She plays the piano. She teaches kids the piano. She does stuff like that. And I don't know what she's going to sing today. So let's see. Right. Anyway, whilst we're waiting for her, because she is here, right. So music influences now, because I mean, music has changed a lot. And my son plays music, and it's just rubbish. I mean, I just do not feel that feeling. I have to go back to the older music. I mean, there's so much more in the old music with the lyrics and behind that, and particularly even if you just looked at the Beatles, I mean, the different phases they went through with kind of the psychedelic stuff as well, and yeah, it's just kind of my sort of thing. I mean, I see myself like, I mean, I was never really in a band. I played the acoustic guitar at school, or tried to anyway, because I mean, we had this choice, like you said, like, can you sing? And then you had to go through the note, the kind of the notes or whatever. And they said, no, you can't sing, off you go. And then so I went to play an instrument, and the guitar was kind of the thing at school. So I learned how to play Kumbaya and stuff like that. But I always wanted to be in a punk band. So my neighbor is a good friend, a lot older than me. He said, well, let's form a punk band. So we called it Bobby Bastard and the Illegitimates, right?
I had a brief stint in a punk band.
Yeah?
Yeah. That was a chaotic thing. I remember packing my drums in the car, driving to Toronto, and I just setting it up, and I had this way too big of a drum set for the music, but I could keep a beat, and so they said, yeah, good, you're in. And then the next afternoon, we were already live, and it was just total chaos. But people were getting off on it. They was like inviting us to gigs right away elsewhere. But I mean, the singer, I mean, she was cool, but the guitarist was on something. I don't know what he was taking, but I was like, okay, this guy's a live wire. I can't get into this. This is just, So it was a brief stint, but it was a bit of an interesting, crazy.
Did you have a stage name?
Sorry, Tony.
Okay. Was I on stage? Sorry.
No, I mean a stage name. I mean,
no, I didn't have a stage name.
The band I was in, I mean, we all had weird names. I mean, being a punk band, you had to have like odd names. So I mean,
right.
Robert was my friend. So I mean, he was the lead singer. So he was Bobby Bastard, right? I was Jimmy Durex, right? And yeah, I can't remember the other names, but it was just one of these things that you did when you were younger. So,
well, we weren't that cool yet. We were in Canada.
Yeah, this was in the late 77 on upwards. So anyway, Emily, you're here.
I'm here. Hi.
Right. So Emily, yeah, this is perfect timing because Frank was just telling us about his music career and that he plays. Did you sing as well, Frank?
Well, I mean, I started to, when I was late in my music composition days, I began to explore that a little bit. So yeah, to a degree, yes, but I wouldn't call myself a singer. My dad was a singer.
Oh, right. Okay. And the main instrument that you play now is what?
The computer.
No, but you still play the saxophone.
I don't anymore. In fact, it was funny when I was in Cologne visiting a friend of mine a few years back. Their roommate was a saxophone, had a sax. He gave it to me. I couldn't even get a note out of it. It was embarrassing. But I do still play percussion. I have a hang drum. I bought a hang drum, and I've been exploring hang drum for the last couple of months. And I learned how to play the didgeridoo and the mouth harp, and of course I could play any drum kit if you put it in front of me fairly competently still, probably to this day.
But you're more comfortable with pots and pans.
Yeah, exactly. I'm better with cooking. Mm-hmm.
No, I meant the hit the pots and pans. Yeah, but you're a good cook as well. We'll have to come on to that later. Right. Okay. So Emily, who are you with? Maybe introduce yourselves. Tell us the song you're going to sing, and then the spotlight's on you.
Okay, so I am with Nicola, my beautiful pianist. Hello.
Hello.
We have a concert tomorrow, so we're about to do a run through of the set.
Oh, very good. So what's the song you're going to sing?
We're going to sing a song called Padam by Epitaph.
Never heard of it. Right. Right. Sylvia has, haven't you? Yeah, no.
I think you just don't know, but I'm pretty sure you've heard it.
Right, okay. Right, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Merci. Oh, thank you.
Bravo. Yeah,
Very French.
yeah, very. So why did you pick that one? I mean, you're having a concert or something tonight. What are you doing?
So the concert tomorrow is so the lady wanted mainly French songs. So
This is this rich lady with the parties in the garden.
yeah, in her house. Yeah, exactly. I don't know if she's rich, but yeah.
Can't you sneak me in? I could be the barman.
Yeah.
She don't have bar staff, but I think you have to apply for a job there.
Yeah.
Or pay your ticket.
All right. Okay. All right. So it's a special theme that she does, a monthly thing or whatever.
Yeah, she does it about once a month or once every 2 months, and then she invites different musicians. It's usually more Latino music, because her husband's in a salsa band. But yeah, but this time it's not.
All right, excellent. So maybe you get together with Frank because he can play some instruments.
I could play some drums to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, where are you based? Which country?
Bavaria, Germany.
Okay.
Makes it a little bit difficult, right? Yeah.
That's not so far. I mean,
Well, if they would release the teleportation technology to us, then I could do it. But
yeah.
kind of limited there. Hey, I noticed my friend Don Hogue from Facebook has showed up. Hey, Don, great to see you. I think he's up late.
Yeah. Hi, Don. So sorry not to. I noticed you joined. We just didn't want to interrupt the flow. So hi, Don, as well for joining. So, Emily, right? Are you hanging around, or you have to shoot off?
We have to shoot off to start our run through, actually.
Right. Well, thanks for joining.
No problem. Send me the recording. I'd like to hear more about you and your musical journey, Frank.
Yeah. I mean, do you ever listen to the recordings? Want to send you them?
Yeah, some of them. Depends on the person.
Right. Okay. But
We talked a lot about it, so there's some stuff I think to listen to. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you'll love this one.
Okay. Then please send it.
Okay. Thanks, Emily. So,
right.
any questions from anyone before we get back to Frank? Anyone got any questions? Everything going okay so far?
If I can, I don't know if this is off topic. I wanted to ask Frank about his vegetarian in and off journey, because I'm 5 years in. No plans of getting off, but I like to hear people's stories.
You're 5 years in?
Yes.
Well, I was, when I started reading those books, those metaphysical books, when I was very young, I noticed that theme that a lot of people that were in, like, it kept coming up, that they were talking about vegetarianism, and so I decided, early that I wanted to explore that. And so after being a butcher, I decided to, Now, this is funny. It sounds crazy, but yes, at one point in my life, as I was working in grocery stores, because my neighbor was a manager and I was trying to make money to buy drum kit, the meat department actually moved me into their department and taught me how to cut meat, because they would go on summer holidays, and I'm like, well, I could make some extra money, right? So I learned the whole trade, and I found it was fascinating because it was like, I know it's not directly about vegetarianism, but it'll lead there. That for me, it was like anatomy. I looked at these, these chunks of meat and stuff, like it was like, just, okay, it's like, when you see these books, when you have all the muscles. And so it was like a matter of separating the muscles. And so I was into that. I thought it was kind of cool. And I made a bunch of money, and actually was what kind of allowed me to buy very expensive musical equipment, because I was making good money at the time. I was like 17, 16, 17, 18 years old. And I had like the best drum kit, I had Gretsch and I had Simmons and, everything I needed. Right. So that set me up. And then I knew one day I was going to jump from that career or that job into the art world, and that as a musician. And I did make that jump. And at that point, very soon on, I ran into kind of a musical partner, and they were into vegetarianism. And then we ended up in Boston at a place called the Theosophical Society, and one of the people that was there that was speaking was a woman by the name of Anne Wigmore. And Anne Wigmore was, very famous for having founded the Hippocrates Institute, which she had a clinic in Boston where people came to do wheatgrass juice and enemas and sprouts and all that stuff. So I got exposed to that because the partner that I was together with was, actually living there. And so I got deeply into that. So for about 15 years of my life, I really perfected that whole, it was called, Anne Wigmore called it the living food lifestyle. And you can look up, Anne Wigmore is famous for a book called Why Suffer. And although her material is probably not being published any longer, it may not be so easy to find. Mm-hmm. She was one of the pivotal people for me in the vegetarian scene, because she took it beyond the idea of just cooked vegetables. Because the problem with cooked vegetables is something that I was talking to John Nolan about recently on Inspired. I don't know if you follow any of our interviews and stuff, but we talked about something called bovies, a Bovie scale, which is like the photoelectronic morphogenetic field that food gives off, and that everything gives off, not just food. But in this particular case, food that is cooked and over processed, it loses its Bovie energy, and it becomes more of it's a thing your body has to struggle to digest. In fact, there's something called pathological leukocytosis, which is when you eat. They've studied, they did a huge study of the eating patterns of people in China, because they were trying to figure out, why do people in China not get cancer like the people in the West do on the same level? And they found, they found out that it had to do with, and they looked at the blood picture of people that were, eating food in the East and people in the West. And they discovered that when people in the West ate food, like, for example, chicken, like all the time, or meat, like heavy red meat, in particular heavy red meat, they developed an elevated white blood cell count when they were digesting the food, and they couldn't figure out why, and they gave it the name, and that was called pathological leukocytosis, because when you elevate your white blood cell count, it means you have kind of leukemia, right? We all know leukemia is an over-elevated white blood cell count. And it would go back down again after they had digested the food. So it just became accepted that it was a normal process of digestion. Pathological leukocytosis, it was considered normal, right, in the West. But actually it isn't. What happens is your body divests a massive amount of energy to attack this foreign invader. And that's why when you have people at Thanksgiving, they go and they eat a huge turkey dinner, what happens afterward? They all have to go lie down, sleep, a nap afterward, because they're just exhausted, because their bodies are trying to get rid of all this invaded stuff. So Anne Wigmore's, to the point here, Anne Wigmore's living food lifestyle was a way to not just eat raw vegetables, because raw vegetables have the problem that your body has to exert energy to break down the cell wall. And our digestive systems, though we're omnivores, isn't really optimized to break down cell walls of raw vegetables as well. So Anne figured out a way to take vegetables and fruits and sprouts and make and pre-ferment them, kind of, which is a process of breaking the cell wall, and it actually generates B vitamins at the same time, which is another thing that people into vegetarianism are lacking: B vitamins. That's why they're always at the health food store buying B vitamin supplements, because they're not getting enough. Or they eat spirulina. Spirulina is very famous for being high. It probably has the highest level of B vitamins, even higher than meat does. And so, I would eat a lot of spirulina, and I would eat a lot of the living foods. And so I got into that very heavily. And what happens is that because of this thing called the Bovies, your body chemistry changes. You actually begin over time to, like, the food really energizes you, and it actually sheds a lot. You realize how much of your body's lethargic energy is due to improper diet. And, for people who are, even vegetarianism isn't necessarily the highest form of diet, isn't necessarily good for every person. And everyone has a certain blood type on top of it. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be careful as a vegetarian that you're not actually, eating something which is depleting your body's energy, life force. You need to supplement it with something which your body understands. And that's not always going to be supplements, because supplements are overdosed levels of vitamins. And in nature, when you eat like spirulina, which is high in B vitamins, it's a natural form of B vitamins, and anything in nature our bodies are tuned to. So when we eat things of high energy and vitamin and mineral content that are naturally occurring in the environment, our body absorbs 100% of that energy. But when we eat vitamin supplements and we get this mega dose of stuff, again, it adds toxicity into the system. People that are taking high dose level of vitamins, like vitamin C, for example, they can actually get very acidic, and they can develop a certain toxemia in their bodies. So you need to be aware of this stuff when you're into vegetarianism. It's the only advice I can give you. The reason I don't hold the diet as strict as I used to is for a number of factors. At that point in my life, I was living, isolated and away from major cities, and a lot of interaction with a lot of people. But I found it became increasingly difficult to interact with people that were in the sludge of normal dietary practice. And it's amazing how you can identify that at some point. It became very, very difficult to even have a conversation with people, because it was like they would be complaining about stuff. I'm going like, yeah, Well, I know what the cure to that is, but you're not going to believe it because it takes effort. It takes a mindset. It takes, that you're not going to want to adopt. And then at one point I had to break my lifestyle off and left to California. And I began working with other people, and I didn't have the opportunity. At that point, I was cultivating my own indoor gardening, doing the sprouts and doing all this stuff. I couldn't do that anymore. And so I started to do more juicing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people that I was working with, of course, they were all hardcore carnivores. So it was funny. Ironically, they used to ask me to go get the steaks because I knew the best steaks. Why? Because I was a meat cutter before. I knew the best steak. I knew, what it should look like, and what should, how much fat content it should have to be tender and stuff. So I became nature boy in that crowd of people, and I would teach them about whatever, try to get them. But eventually, what happened is I started then to eat fish. And then I started to eat chicken and, poultry a little bit here and there. And, I basically realized, okay, I'm going to choose my poisons because I need to be able to interact with the world. I needed to adopt a certain amount of sludge as a protective mechanism between my inner sensitive self and that hard, brutal, crazy world out there. And so that became my own personal diet. So now I live kind of a life of, I don't eat any canned processed, prefabricated foods. I actually cook my own food, which takes a certain amount of energy and time out of my life. And so, but I think it's important that people don't eat processed foods. And I think the argument about organic versus inorganic is less important as, make it fresh than eating it prefabbed or pre-made or cooked, in some restaurant or whatever. And that I feel that works because I don't suffer from a lot of illness. I generally consider myself very healthy, and I'm generally older than people. I mean, I'm older than a lot of people peg me as, because my body is not succumbing to the lethargic energy that depletion of bad foods will cause. That's why people age so quickly. The process of aging isn't necessary,
Yeah, Frank's 35, aren't you? You're 35.
Exactly. So, the thing is, you realize that you see through the whole argument of aging and death and stuff like that, it's all like contaminated with this misinformation. And I only say it to you, Sylvia, because not because I'm trying to preach. I have actually lived it. I'm the living proof of it. I've done everything I'm telling you about. I've done it myself. I've already beta tested. I've done it. I've tested it. It works or it doesn't work, or what works for me that works in the real world. I found a formula that works for me. So I think what's important is not to become obsessed with diet now. It's like, if you can't eat vegetarianism, then eat some meat. It's like, who cares, right? Like, your body can. I just don't eat red meat. I don't eat Schweinefleisch, which is pork. I don't eat processed foods, and those are kind of my rules. Everything else I try to do in moderation, and I always try to eat fresh. And I always try to eat with consciousness. And I also try to put consciousness into my food. I learned that you can actually, through intention, you can radiate your food with your own biophotonic energy, and you can increase the Bovie level of anything that's in front of you on a plate just by your intention. So there's another level of connectivity to spirit world that is ignored even by people obsessed with diet, that you need to factor into your diet as well. So I hope that gave you a couple of ideas.
You gave me food for thought. Thank you so much for the insights.
Yeah.
Good pun.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a great topic to discuss anyway. I mean, maybe not for this show, but I mean another time, because if you look over the last 2 years, particularly, we want to build up our immune systems. We want to be healthy. We want to be able to fight whatever's going on around there. It doesn't mean you're not going to catch something, but your immune system is going to be more active and help protect you. And
well, I can tell you, James, something that will probably be some cognitive dissonance to you, but you cannot catch anything.
So
it's not
you can't
possible to catch anything. What happens is your body gets toxic. Your body accumulates toxins through their lifestyle that you're living, and at some point your body has to cleanse those toxins out of its system. So what has it done to do that? It's invented a couple of amazing natural phenomena. One of them is called fever. It raises your body's temperature so high that certain bacteria and particles in your system, which the conventional medicine calls viruses, they get expelled. they get killed by your body elevating its temperature. The other thing that it does is it expels those particles that have accumulated in your body. And what science falsely identifies as the virus causing this, like some mosquito landing on you and giving you the virus, it's spreading in your body. This is all false. This is fake news. What is going on is your cells are dumping this stuff out, and they're getting rid of it. They're shedding it out of the system. And your body, to shed that, will sometimes, depending on how toxic you are and contaminated, will depend on how you get affected, how strongly the particular flu or whatever they're saying is going around will affect you. Because if you're relatively healthy and you're clean, you might, once in a while, you'll have a certain toxic dump time and it'll take a day or two and it's gone. The people who are highly contaminated, they will spend a week or two or three or longer. And the COVID one, the newest one, they're calling COVID. Look at what's going on in our world. We have chemtrails being, rained down on us. We have our water contaminated. We have our food supply depleted. We have the soils depleted. We have GMOs being mass produced. We have food being artificially produced now, even the fake meat foods and stuff, they're all being made out of printers. They have no bovies. There's no energy in the food anymore. Our bodies are seeing this as toxins and are accumulating it and storing it until we can get rid of it. And so whenever we get sick nowadays, these waves come and they're even heavier and heavier and heavier because we're getting more and more toxic. Okay, nobody's talking about this, right? This is the kind of stuff that if everyone would know about it, there'd be no need for pharmaceuticals and for supplements, but you can't make money on this stuff, right? It's about follow the dollars, follow the money. And unfortunately, that's what's really going on. And people don't want to hear this because it contravenes also taking self-responsibility for illnesses. And there's another factor that comes into illnesses in society, if I may, and that is people wonder why there's these flu waves, yeah? Well, it has to do with the fact that we're connected to the morphogenetic field. We're actually we're a unit where all of us are connected to a greater soul family. And so these illnesses can actually pass as a kind of form of information processing that many collectively go through at the same time. It's just a little bit different way of looking at illness as being a victim, but rather being somebody who's, cleansing and is collectively processing certain information with other people in society around you.
I completely agree. And the more that we understand that, the better it is. And that's why I've kind of given up on my family doctor, because, just going back to the kind of the academical way, he follows the textbook. He doesn't think outside of the textbook or what the narrative is. And when I ask for advice, I get something that I'm not comfortable with. So I don't go anymon
Right. You don't go. I never went either unless, look, if you get an infection and you need an antibiotic, take it by all means. Don't be an idiot. Mm-hmm. There's some people that are so stubborn in their belief system that they'll go down, they'll die, because I won't do this. Look, there's a reason. There's doctors have a place in society. You break your bone, you want to mend it. You want to have someone come fix it for you. We aren't capable of fixing all of our problems. But, so we should never get overly obsessed with one particular idea. But if doctors were to open their mind up a little bit more to the idea of what I was just talking about, then, there's more of a balance. Then doctors begin to find a place within that way of thinking and can be more effective as doctors even.
Yeah. I say, just caveat that at the moment in the 3D world that we live in, as we evolve and transcend, things will be different, but that's another topic. So, Sylvia, did that answer your question? Because you come from Brazil, and going there myself, every menu has got meat in it.
Yes, but I have no desire of eating meat, and my desire dropped through meditation. I think it happened in one of my meditation sessions, and I grew up to parents who meditated. So it's a practice that has been in my life forever. And there was this one day in which I felt so connected to everything, in visible or invisible, and I just didn't think I have the right of eating something, or eating a brother or sister, like something that is like similar to my energy. I'm like, I'm part of a chain, not a, it didn't feel right. So I just, it was a very cold turkey decision. And it happened about, I think 3 months. It had been something I had been thinking about, because in the US, I had no desire of eating meat whatsoever. I thought it was gross. And so then that happened. And at the same time, I met my husband, and he's born vegetarian to a vegetarian mother and father. So he's allergic to meat. It's something like we can't have close to our kitchen, because that will send him to the hospital. So going to Brazil is challenging in terms of my parents they eat meat every so often, which helps. My sister and brother-in-law are pescatarians. So I know that at home I have a very safe environment to be who I am with my dietary restrictions. But the moment I cross the door, I have to be asking questions all the time, like, the soup, does it have chicken broth in it? And can I have a salad instead? I am ready for this, because one, the desire is not there, and two, I don't want to, and I know how to navigate it. So
Sylvia, no picanha.
Sorry?
No picanha.
No. Oh, picanha. Yes.
So you don't eat a nice picanha on a grill?
No, because I think that,
I'm joking.
Seriously.
Well, one of the things that you're making a good point. And when I think back on when I was hardcore in it, I didn't want to eat any animal products either, because of that connection to, like, what right do I have to take an animal's life? And for me, what I believe is that what I was missing at that time was that I really kind of did not connect with animals in that sense, and I believe that I sort of see it more like the Native Americans, where you actually have a relationship with the particular animal, and you communicate with it. And if you have that relationship, it's more sacred than if you just, you get your food in a plastic wrapped styrofoam tray at the grocery store, and it's called sirloin. It's not called, Betsy the cow. People don't have any connection to their food, and I think that the connection is important. And so it's like the prayer idea of food is, most people, like a lot of people, pray to God, or they do the Lord's Prayer before they eat. But it's funny, they don't pray to the animal, to the fact that the animal's giving them something, and that releases the animal and energizes that spirit of the animal too, because that realizes that, okay, it's come to this reality in a particular kind of density where this sort of exchange happens, and it's been acknowledged, it's been given energy that way. And so very few of us are at that level in society where we really have an energetic relationship with things that we eat, or things that we take into there's so much taken for granted in the world. It's sad, so I totally respect where you're coming from. And if you ever I guess you're probably never going to become non-vegetarian because of your husband, so the next point is kind of pointless, but yeah, that's something I wanted to add into the mix as well.
Yeah. No, funny you should say that. When I eat meat, I don't not like meat, but I like what you said. You kind of, I thank the animal for giving me the food, and in a way it's kind of not feeling so guilty, although I've still eaten the animal, but I've let it kind of go on and pass over in a more humane way by kind of a little prayer to it. Anyway, let's move on to what you're doing now, Frank, because we've got to this point, and I think it's interesting to know where you are now. What are you doing? You've done lots of movies and productions, and special things. You've talked about people that you follow, and yeah, take us through that.
Wow. Okay. Where do I start? I think
Kind of the
where
film
I am
producer.
now and what I'm doing now has more to do with, I guess, the last sort of the newest chapter of my life, which was centering around deciding to go back into, because I tried to renounce all of my analytical conspiracy kind of beingness, because it got me kind of into trouble for a while. And so I came to Europe and I thought I would escape it back into the matrix and insert myself back in and try to be a normie. And I think it lasted about maybe 4 years or something, 5 years. And then I realized, okay, it's just not working. I can't ignore what I know and live in the society that I'm living in. And so I decided to get back into where I was and take up where I left off in a way, but be more effective with it and, become a voice for the information that I felt was sorely lacking out there. Just like when I was doing music, I wanted to do music that was missing, that I wasn't hearing out there. When I decided to get back into disclosure-oriented material or truth awakening kind of information, I wanted to be very effective at it and incorporate all the skills that I had accumulated over the lifetime that I'd lived, and that happened to be, sound and picture and information. So the combining sound, picture, and information for me was the key to raising consciousness, because I realized fewer people wanted to read books, and fewer people and more people are looking for some kind of an entertainment value in their awakening process. It sounds kind of banal, but look, if you can wake someone up and entertain them at the same time, that's the coolest way of doing it, because you kind of take them on a journey, you make them feel something, and you impart information that's critical for them to help break down myths and untruths in the world around them, because we've all become programmed by this society. We talked about at the very beginning of our talk today, how we've entered in society, and those who have risen to the highest places in our normie world are those that have ignored those, critical thinking faculties and gone for the, this is this is what we should learn to get the best marks, to get the best grade, to get the best job. And that's beginning to break down, and it's beginning to confront that world of people that are critical thinkers. And so I wanted to, see myself out there, somebody to use those skills. And the first thing I did was to make a film about, I decided to do, I was looking for a project actually, and this film ended up turning into Packing for Mars. And the process of making Packing for Mars took about 5 years. And in the course of making that film, I ran into my partner, Tanya Maidenford, who had a company in America called Screen Addiction. And when I was looking for information or leads to get to certain people, it turns out that when I ran into her, she knew a lot of those people, as the universe would make it work out. It's like one of the lines is, the universe will open the doors to a fool wanting to know a secret. And that's kind of the attitude I took. I just went out there with a blank slate. I didn't know much about this UFO world or any of that stuff, but I watched some things about disclosure movement, and it fascinated me, because the last time I was interested in UFOs, I was 12, and I'd read the Billy Meyer case, and there were the people involved and the tests that they had done to prove it's authentic and stuff. So, but I figured because it was so real that it would be no time before everyone would know about it, but it had never happened, at least not in the interim.
Yeah, let me just pause you there. So, I mean, I grew up also fascinated with kind of UFOs and ETs and what's out there, and I couldn't believe that we're the only ones here. It just didn't make any sense. So, I mean, I read books like kind of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and then also listened to David Bowie and Space Odyssey and stuff like that. Lots of sci-fi movies, and then more recently kind of the Avatar movies, and trying to join things together and make any sense about, well, why is there so much information about it, but we're told there's nothing actually there? But we have all this information that kind of proves there is something there.
Yes.
There's nothing there.
Sorry.
And then more recently, following people like Sir Michael Sala, and then kind of connecting to you and others. But I mean, that fascinates the hell out of me. And I mean, this disclosure now with NASA and Area 52 and all of the things that are happening, what's going on in Antarctica, and I mean, and NASA's images. I mean, we could go on kind of all day talking about this, but I mean,
well, yeah, that inspired me too. And I think for me, the inspiration was Jose Escamilla's films. Yeah, the moon films, like the moon rising and stuff, right? Because that's the first time I kind of took another look at it since I had been making films, and he's a filmmaker, and I was like, wow, he's showing us actual NASA photograph telescopic images. I mean, he wasn't inventing this stuff. He was actually showing us real anomalous activities that were going on the surface of the moon. And I thought, hey, everybody should know this. I mean, if this is going on, then there must be more going on. And for me, the inspiration was a book called Alternative 3, which somebody had passed to me back when I was living in Ontario, and I was doing living foods and things like that. And I went to this particular farmer that had certain minerals that he was using to fertilize his soil, because we were doing our own indoor gardening and stuff. So I met this guy, and he had this book, and we'd get into these philosophical discussions, and he slams this book down on the table and says, "This is reality masking as fiction." And so that fascinated me. So that became kind of the path to go toward for making Packing for Mars. And of course, Packing for Mars then led down the rabbit hole, not just in terms of the film about Mars, but I began to meet, other characters, other people that were deeply enmeshed in this sort of secret part of society, what we call the breakaway civilization. And you realize that there's this civilization that we have out there that everyone is, like we said, they're living in the past. Everything they learned is already obsolete. They've collectively decided to live in the past tense. And then there's those in the breakaway civilization who are working with real-time reality. They're working with the real information, the real physics, and the real knowledge about extraterrestrial civilizations and other, evidence of the fact that, man has, that there's more to the universe than just us on this little planet. So, that became kind of the foundation for everything in my new chapter of life, which is now probably about, 12, 13, 14 years that I've been sort of venturing down this newer street.
So you made a movie out of this, or a documentary, or
documentary, yeah.
Right. And it's available. I mean, we could look it up.
Yes, if you go to my website, there's a link for films, and the films are all the films that I've produced or we've produced, meaning myself with Tanya Maidenford. We together, once we hooked up, we were like the Scully Mulder team, and we began to go into these down the rabbit hole. And another thing that we produced is Solar Revolution, talking about the impact of the cosmos, the cosmic radiation, particularly in relationship to the sun on human consciousness. There's no comparative film out there which goes into the science of that. And that was done 10 years ago. And that came in between, even finishing Packing for Mars.
So can I ask you a question then? So is the sun really 93 million miles away, or is it local?
Oh, I don't know, but I don't believe it's local. No, I do believe that there's a galaxy with a center, and that there's a unified, cosmic body, which is, I do believe that cosmic body is an extension of our own bodies, that we are an extension of it, that we are in a kind of symbiotic relationship with the whole cosmos. Actually, I'm leaning more back toward the, the idea that, that we're geocentric, not heliocentric. I don't necessarily believe that we're traveling anymore, that we're hurling through space as this fire, chasing this fireball. More, it's like, what the geocentric model is, right? The geocentric model is based around the fact that the original idea, the Ptolemaic maps and stuff, were all about the sun and everything is revolving around the earth. And of course, the Copernican scientific, Galilean concept began to move us toward, no, that's stupid, we're just like, we're not alone in the middle of the universe and everything else is moving around us. It's the other way around. We're just an insignificant speck of dust hurling through space insignificantly, and we're destined to be nothing. We just by accident have been around long enough, and the rocks and molecules slam together so often in so many combinations that eventually humanity and consciousness emerged, right? I'm moving away from that idea and moving back into the idea that maybe there is a creator being, and maybe we are part of that creator being's main creation. And that maybe, in fact, it's interesting there's a film out there called The Principle, which I recommend people watch. And it talks about this geocentric versus heliocentric model in modern scientific terms. And the latest gamma radiation pictures coming from space that were brought back, from, the Planck satellites and stuff that are showing us the radiation levels in the universe, the heat signatures of the universe, and certain other data and the spacing of galaxies and particular air rays uncannily point to the idea that, wow, we do seem to be possibly right at the center of all of this, that there might be something really special about us. And why not think about that? Because what is it, who are the people that are telling us that we're nothing? Those are the scientists that are pitching the pandemic. That this whole idea that we're victims, their idea, I have already explored a lot of their ideology for myself and proven it for myself to be inauthentic or downright lies, funded, money-centric, propaganda. So why not explore this more from a level of consciousness and the fact that maybe we are at the center of the universe? So I do believe that, the sun is relative to us, that we do move around it. But there's a certain, Ernst Mach said that there's a math you can work out that actually proves that whether you look at it mathematically from a geocentric or a heliocentric perspective, both are valid. Yeah. Both maths are valid. Yeah. Okay. So
yeah, I agree. Kind of venturing down maybe similar rabbit holes also. I've also noticed that, when someone mentioned to me that the earth is flat, I think, oh, what an idiot. Of course it's a ball. We're taught that at school. But if you look at early kind of maps, they're always flat. Now, was it flat because they didn't know? But anyway, then other things start joining up, and then you start questioning. And then maybe I need to look into this a bit deeper, because I would think that whoever said it was flat must be an idiot, right?
Well, but then let me ask you this question, right? When you're talking about maps,
yeah.
What form do books take, and what form do newspapers take? They're flat, right?
Yeah.
Or they're not round, right? You don't have round newspapers and round books,
yeah.
Right? Well, how would you depict the world a round world on a flat piece of paper? How would you do that if you didn't have round paper? You would depict the world the way it's depicted on a flat piece of paper, right?
True. But
so,
then,
flat Earth on a flat piece of paper. But
yeah.
You can also see the proportions are adjusted accordingly, so that if you were to rebuild it as a round thing, then it would be round, right? And okay, maybe it's not perfectly round like a ball. Maybe it's more like a toroidal field where there's a.
But what about? If you then take a biblical text and stuff with the firmament and kind of the dome shape, beyond the ice wall, why we're not allowed to go to Antarctica? Why can't we go beyond a certain point?
But you can. I know people personally that have. They've ran. I know a guy who set a world record, who was dropped off at the edge of the ice field, and he ran to the center, the center of the South Pole, and he was arrested by the CIA when he got there. But he ran, and he documented it, and he had his geo-locating device with him, and he filmed himself doing it, and he made a film about it. Okay, so I'm sorry. Look, just hire a plane. Okay, do a fundraiser, GoFundMe or Give, Send, Go. Why doesn't some of these flat earthers do that? Raise $100,000 or $200,000, get on a plane and fly over. Get permissions. Do all the necessary paperwork and do it. Or don't do it. Go under the radar. Fly under the radar like he did. He couldn't get he couldn't get a big sponsor to pay, so he paid some Russian pilot who was willing to fly under the radar and drop him off. But he did it.
I know we're kind of digressing a bit here, but what about Admiral T. Bird, that when he flew, he went there and his plane was actually taken over the control?
Yeah, I think he was taken to the inner Earth. If I want to believe anything, I think he was taken to the entry, because I believe that it's quite likely that there are entry portals. On the vortal, you know, when if the globe is spinning, if you take any glass of water and you spin it, what happens, right? There's a center part that becomes a hollow part, and all the matter gets pushed to the edge. So I think my model of the world would have to include the idea that the Earth spinning the matter would be pushed to the outside, and there would be vortal entry points on the North and South Pole. And I think that that's a viable perspective. And I think it's worth studying and worth looking into. And there are people that tried to enter. There's legends and books that were written back in the 1900s about people that apparently had slipped into those entry points. So, and there's a talk about Bird being taken into the inner Earth. And so I think the inner Earth has much more validity to me than the flat Earth. Okay, so call me a crazy inner Earth guy then, but I think the flat Earth doesn't work for me, because you know why? They have to have a new theory for every single discrepancy in their ideology. Whereas the round model explains everything nicely. I mean, that's how science should work. The science shouldn't be trying to figure out how complicated you can make things with as many different theories that, you know, explain why something else can't be explained. And instead, they should find a common denominator that explains everything if possible. Now, the heliocentric model has a lot of problems because why? Because the idea of dark matter and the expanding universe and the Big Bang, okay, that's where it has a problem. And in fact, the erroneous nature of the heliocentric model is so off that the experimental quotient, the ratio of theory to error, is 10 to the power of 120. So that shows you right there, there's some serious, serious problems with the heliocentric model. But that doesn't mean the Earth isn't round.
Anyway, this would be a great panel discussion, because there's lots of things. I mean, I don't profess that it's flat or round. I want good arguments from both sides to prove otherwise. And you can have compelling arguments that is a ball spinning in space, and you can have compelling arguments that it's flat. So we will know at some point. Now, I will sit in the middle, and I can side with one, and I believe with that, but I also believe that, and somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Well, there's also a CIA-funded group of people that actually got money to put the flat Earth system and ideology into the awakened crowd. They actually, it's actually dollar figures on it, right? So, I mean, when I hear stuff like that, and I get information given to me about those programs, and I realize, okay, when they've already spent $120,000 two times to impregnate, the awakening community, a thinking intellectual crowd with a new wacky theory, because look, face it, most people aren't mathematicians or physicists. And so, a lot of these guys that are talking about this stuff, they're not geniuses, math geniuses. So of course they're going to question stuff because they don't understand physics. So, it's going to be easy to sell somebody on a lie if they don't have a really deep knowledge of a particular aspect of physics. Yeah. I mean, look, how many of us can put together a microphone? Right. I mean, just the simple idea that I'm talking to you right now is going into a membrane, being converted into electric signals, going into a computer, landing out on the internet, and coming into your living room. Who can build that? I mean, not many people. Who even understands how that works? That's a very simple form of technology. And yet the physics behind the globe and the weather and the if you add all those things together, it's so complex that, of course, a flat Earth is not going to understand that.
The thing is, that's another point. I mean, organizations, three-letter organizations, want us to believe and actually fight amongst ourselves. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Which is, rather than fighting amongst ourselves, moving forward and moving from that kind of lower vibration to the higher frequencies.
Well, you were saying, what I'm into now is the truth. I want to know the truth. I've explored some wacky subjects in my films, but that's because I'm a truth seeker and I want to bring the findings and share those findings with people. And so, this is what it should be about. And I see a lot of exactly what you're talking about. putting fake people, fake authors, misinformation, controlled opposition is the word. Okay, they put that stuff out there and they pay these people as actors, and they're good. They're good actors. You know, look, I mean, you know, a good actor should be so good that you can't believe he's acting.
That's the government,
best
isn't it?
Oscar-winning films are the films where you actually lose yourself in the film. Why? Because you actually believe the actor. You believe them. And the minute, and you always know when you see a film where with bad acting, you realize, okay, it's like it's bad. You know, once you realize it's bad acting, you lose the plot. You lose the plot. And so the only way controlled opposition works is if the actors that are placed into position of influence are excellent. They're Oscar-winning actors. They're out there, they memorize things well, they memorize scripts, and if someone contradicts them, the next time they come back on the show, they'll have found an excuse why they didn't have that particular fact that they should have known, and they'll convince the people listening who want to believe, because we all sense there's something not right about reality, that the truth is missing, so we believe these so-called truth tellers.
Exactly. And we don't want to go open up the Pandora box of Hollywood.
Right.
We'll save that for another day. Right. So let's kind of move on, because we've covered a lot already, and I know we spoke at the beginning that, I mean, which story and which journey do we want to go on, because there's so many things, Frank, that you could tell us about. We probably we could have a show on you for the next year. But I mean, very interesting, and it's too easy to go off on a tangent as well and start talking about something. So we kind of need to wrap up in a minute. So let's just say, kind of cover very briefly, maybe what you're doing, how we can get in touch with you, any questions you've got to the audience, and kind of wrap it up a bit.
Well, the best way for people who want to explore the subjects that I'm putting out there to get in touch with me, I guess the simplest one is my website, which is easy to remember. It's just my name, frankjacob.com. And you can, at the top of that website, you can see links to pretty much all of the material that I'm putting out, including links to my IMDb website if you want to see the films that I have put out there, the projects I've done, shows, even for GAIA TV and for other, like for Red Bull, and, and series that we've produced, films that we've produced together. There's also links to a webinar that I produced this summer, which is based on this crazy story about people calling themselves Guardians of the Looking Glass, who surfaced in March of this year, talking about something crazy called the Looking Glass, the Project Looking Glass. And so I broke that story. That story kind of went viral, and it led to me producing a webinar, which is a 6-hour deep dive into what that was all about, where it came from, what it means, and how it pertains in particular to consciousness, which is my own pet project. Like, I like to always relate it to, what does it mean? Is it useful to us? Is it just some crazy information like Tartaria, but is it going to bring us further? Because we are at a critical point in society right now, and humanity, where there's such a thing called a timeline, which is happening. And there's the ability for us to make a decision collectively is based on our consensus. What do we collectively believe is reality? And there's a very powerful cabal of people, an organized movement of people that are pushing us toward an artificial based reality, based on artificial intelligence, based on transhumanism, which is moving us away from biological existence as human beings and into a completely silicon based non-carbon world. In fact, carbon, which is what we're made of, is the sin. So we have become the ultimate sin as human beings. We have been forced to accept or adopt ideologies which would make us want to become extinct, make our biological version of humanity disappear for this planet. And Yuval Harari, who's one of the prophets of the World Economic Forum's leaders, says that in the next 100 years, there will no longer be human beings the way we see them right now. So what you are looking at when you look left and right and forward and backward around you, if you see any human beings, take a good look at them, because they could be the final generation of natural, organic, biological human beings. This is a sad reality, but that's happening. So I want to make people aware of that. So the webinar and the information that I'm putting out there, the talks that I do with people like John Nolan on Inspire Network and many others. I mean, there's been many shows that I've been on. Not all of them have a very large reach because people are more into the mainstream still, the majority, but those who are interested in alternative information, those channels are out there, and I'm on a lot of those channels talking about these subjects because I find they're very important. If we have a chance to do something about whether or not we branch off on a timeline toward complete artificiality, or the timeline splits into one where we become our fullest version of normal, natural human beings, then I want to push that one, because that's the one I personally am invested in. And I would rather see the other timeline shrivel and die, and just use the best parts of it. I'm not a technophobe. I have technology all around me. I use technology to produce things. I'm one of that first, people that kind of learn to osmose with technology and my mindset, so I can express myself through technology. It's not evil, but it does become a problem and an issue when the technology is being developed to the point by people who have no ethical consideration, to the point where it actually could become a threat to humanity's existence. And so those are some of the topics, and that's what I talk about. And if you go to my website, then you will find links to like cyberhive.tv is one site where I have the webinar. And there's also a forum you can log into for free, and you can join and chat. I talk about, people that hit me up with subjects and talks and information or emails or messages. I answer them mostly when I have time. And you can find all that stuff there. But I think it's important for the people listening out there to make that, to start considering that maybe they don't want to become a vigilante or a rebel to try and change it, but you need to start asking yourself, or you need to take into cognition the fact that there are people right now planning in a completely artificial world for humanity to inhabit. They're extremely well funded. They have the media working in their favor. They have placed government officials in virtually every G7 government to make sure that their agenda is pushed forward. And they are quite happy to lie to you if necessary, or to over-exaggerate or to misconstrue or misrepresent scientific facts toward favoring an agenda that they're trying to push. And if we don't start to actually consider that they're coming for us with this new world that they want to create, then we will wake up one day in that new world, and we will be the minority, and we will be on the way to extinction. And right now, we still have a chance to talk about those things. We can still put it up for the debate. And if it turns out that the majority of people are saying, I'm cool with it, I'm down with it, man, here, roll up the sleeve, connect me to the transhumanist new world, I want to be immortal God like you, then so be it. But I think that if people are not even aware that this is something which is happening, then that's the problem. And so that's what this is the discussion. This is the topic we should be putting first and foremost right now in society, above and beyond everything. Forget partisan, disagreements, let's just keep it open in terms of like humanity or robots, because that's where it's going. And we need to talk about it.
Yeah, I completely concur with that. And I mean, more so, as I said, over the last few years, although, I mean, even as a child, I would sit and wonder and philosophize, and particularly as you became a teenager, then maybe smoking a joint and talking with friends at a party, you would discuss kind of things that, I kind of these subjects then. But I follow a lot of the people you follow, hence the reason why, Frank, we came in touch with each other. And I sincerely believe that, we've had many thousands of years, 26,000 years of this darkness, which most people say, what darkness? But things have not been right. We are not the true humans we're ever designed to be. Our DNA has been altered, and we are living kind of the straw man version of ourselves, which isn't our true self. And now, even by saying that, people think you're an idiot, right? Oh, yeah. But it creates a debate that I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying I'm wrong. It's my perception, and it's not just my perception. Others feel the same. And if there's so many thousands of people that are feeling the same, then there's got to be something that's worth discussing. And I'm all for open discussions. I don't have all the answers, but I'm prepared to listen to both sides. I've heard the propaganda thrown in my face, and I see it. I see the lack of authenticity of the people that are supposed to be our leaders, supposed to be preaching well-being, quality of life, and helping humanity. And they're doing the opposite. It is all destructive, low vibration, evil kind of things. And anyone that follows that, I mean, surely they must know within themselves that, well, that doesn't smell right. And don't just accept, well, it is what it is, and just get on with it. I don't accept that anymore. If I can change it for myself, then that's where I start. And I start by going within myself, my inner feeling, there's a book I want to write called The Universe Within Your Mind, because we seem to be searching outside for the answers, but everything is already there. We just need to find it. So, Frank, I absolutely love your work. I love what you do. I think you're a great person. And yeah, I will carry on following you. And some of the stuff that you shared now, I've got to read. I've got to watch as well. And is there anything that, I mean, anyone from the audience that have got any questions to ask before we kind of close this? And Frank, have you got any messages that you want to, any final words that you want to leave us with?
Well, I guess, I've said a lot in this last 2 hours. I guess what I would close with is, first of all, I highly respect you, James, for doing what you're doing. Thank you for having me, and thank you for being patient to listen to all of these interesting ventures and branched off topics we've gone into today, and for being out there and putting yourself out there under the risk of being ridiculed or criticized just for wanting to have a discussion because of following up on hunches and ideas that you have. And what I would say is that these hunches and these ideas are what people that begin to wake up have. They feel something is not right. And like any good science, a scientist will first have a hunch, an idea, and he will think something must be. And then, the evidence for that will come as a result of experimentation or, over time. And what's interesting, what we're living in right now, is there's a lot of people that were talking about what took place starting 2 years ago as a conspiracy, and that introduced technologies that are diabolical and downright evil, leading to a transhumanist world. And as it turns out, now 2 years down the road, the actual, the patents for those technologies have been revealed. They have been downloaded. People are putting them out there. They're discussing them. So this is not even a conspiracy theory any longer. The facts are out there. The technology does exist. And the idea of, conversion from carbon to silicon-based robotic beings is no longer science fiction. We're living in a time right now where what used to be science fiction is science fact. And the idea, some of the stuff that I've been showing on some of these, little excerpts and little interviews is, nano robot technology, which is like, if you didn't know it was really real, like the person, for example, who was filming this, they would be going like, look, it would be like magic. You would think it was fake. But the fact is, it is real. And so this stuff is real. It's not just a theory. So if you feel a hunch or an inkling, don't be afraid. Follow your hunch and don't be perturbed by misinformation. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. Just keep going, keep being vigilant, like all of us have. I've just been doing it a lot longer. And everybody, I'm nothing special. Just the more you do it, you just kind of develop, a certain confidence in the truth, and it should all be about the truth. That's why I say the truth is the new spirituality. And so look for the truth, try to find the truth. Don't be deterred by fake truth. Just because we have an incredible power within us as human beings to be creator beings. We have an amazing ability to form and shape our world and create things. We don't even really realize how amazing and how special and how creatively powerful we are. So, if I can leave with any thought, it would be that. Just remember that you are divine, that you are special, and that you have amazing abilities way, way beyond anything that you would ever dream of. And just know that and act on it. Did I shut the room down?
Excellent. Yeah, I was talking to myself. So, I mean, that is absolutely excellent. I mean, I love what you've said. As I said, I mean, me personally, I could listen to you all day. I would love to go down on tangents on different areas. I'm sure most of them will agree on others. We could have a healthy discussion, and that's what it's all about, a healthy discussion. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I'm open to listen. And I think, I mean, I hope this has brought entertainment value and also an awakening kind of feeling that people can start looking at what Frank's work, what he does, watch some of the documentaries, connect with him, ask him questions. And yeah, if you want to know more, if you're curious enough, I mean, most people think, it's all baloney, I'll just get back to my day job. And yeah.
We just had that happen, didn't we, Maya? You're still here. Thanks for showing up and hanging out with us, Maya. And thank you, because Maya really tried to make this happen in the physical we're doing here in Düsseldorf. And exactly what you're describing is what happened. One person decided, no, this is all crap. This is just conspiracy theory. It's evil. It's evil. We can't have that man come. Do not bring him here.
Frank, we're not giving up. Huh?
We're not, because, I mean, there's too many people that can push what they want. And I thought we're supposed to be in a free, which there's no such thing as a free society, that we have got freedom of expression, freedom of speech. And yeah, if some people want to listen to that, that's up to them. If you don't, it's like watching movies on TV. I don't have to watch ones that I don't like, but they're there still, right? There's a choice. I don't watch that. I mean, there's many movies my wife likes to watch, that Victorian dramas that I can't stand, right? But I don't have to watch them, but she can watch them. There's no problem. So it's kind of that freedom that you have the choice, right? But anyway, so Frank, yeah, a fantastic guy. I love what you do. I love your work. And yeah, I hope we meet on other forums and debates and things another time. And for the audience, I mean, thanks for sitting through this. It has been an extra long one, which is normally 1 hour and kind of gone on for 2 hours. But I mean, something that to me is very dear to me as well. So thank you everyone for joining. And for those new people, I mean, we have different guests every week. I mean, they're different guests. I mean, all sorts of things. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything that's deemed conspiracy. I mean, they're just guests. It's just that, yeah, I kind of pick my guest and we go with it. And for me, I've learned something about Frank that I never knew before. And kind of a few months ago, I didn't even know who Frank was. And now, yeah, I would follow him and take advice from him and love what he does. So on that note, Frank, you've been our 102nd guest. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me again. It's been good. It's been fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you guys for hanging out and being here the whole time to guide and give us your energy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And have a wonderful weekend. And yeah, same time next week.
See you then.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Wow, that was another featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact. If you'd like to be our next featured guest or learn how James Mofat can help you leverage on the art and power of interactive storytelling for your business, reach out and schedule a call now.